Game of Thrones, A Song of Ice and Fire. We did record one new video on this topic that was over an hour long, had a lot of laughter, had a lot of jokes about sex and eunuchs, and a lot of below-the-belt humor. And that video never got uploaded. But the broader truth is, we both kind of lost all interest in talking about the TV show. We lost all interest in talking about the books. We lost all interest in reading the books. Because the overall effect of this season was so disheartening, demotivating, or just uninteresting. We just straight up lost interest in doing Game of Thrones, A Song of Ice and Fire commentary. Another thing, so you have not seen this. This is news to you. I've never mentioned this to you before. There was this really broad change in the mood of A Song of Ice and Fire YouTube, the YouTube Game of Thrones demimonde. Where before, so the last video we had up on the channel, that was actually just a response to like episode 2 or episode 3, I forget which one.
Yeah.
Where we just said this episode was awful. It's just mind-blowing how awful it is. There was this shift from kind of everyone making excuses for the show and being really positive about the show to like a couple weeks after the season ended, it went to the opposite extreme. And there have been a whole bunch of like really janky, not particularly well thought out videos that are just titled like Game of Thrones sucks now. Like Game of Thrones is now garbage. That have gotten tens of thousands of views, 30,000, 60,000 or over 100,000 views. I think because a lot of people are now, wandering around the internet looking for that echo chamber, looking to reinforce, their feelings. The actual pros, the people who make their money writing about Game of Thrones in magazines, they're still saying it's a masterpiece, which is interesting. But it seems like more and more of the fandom has turned against the show. And with that comes a certain level of lack of confidence, even in the books. Because part of what's been happening, too, again, you don't know about this, there have been all these leaks, allegedly from hacked computers in the Heartless Corporation making the TV show, which kind of shows how weak, I don't want to say, how weak the writing process is. Does that even make sense? They're working from these very sketchy instructions from George R.R. Martin and coming up with what the final outcome of the show is supposed to be in terms of reflections on democracy and monarchy. And so in terms of the directions the books are going in, people have kind of less confidence than ever before. Of course, there's this bedrock assumption that the books are going to be better than the show, but how much better, we really don't know. So there's a real sense of doom.
Didn't you say that George R.R. Martin was really negative about the show? Like he's made comments that he doesn't even watch it when it first comes out.
Right. No. So that's also a point. It's a question: how much weight do you put in that? So he has stated he now doesn't watch the TV show anymore.
Right. So the author of the original books doesn't even like the series anymore.
Right. That's what people are reading into it. There's another way to look at that. Another way to look at it is he's way, way behind in terms of the actual writing. And maybe a long time ago he should have stopped doing promo tours, stopped being involved with the TV show. Maybe he should have just buckled down and been trying to make the deadline in the books. You could put more than one spin on it. But I think most people feel that the author has lost faith in the creative direction of the process. Yeah, of the project. Yeah. So, to give you an example, so there was one video up which is part of this new kind of school of thought of saying Game of Thrones sucks, which has kind of like already become hackneyed. And again, like I don't feel motivated to pile on it. Our former video, we did a lot of laughing about how awful Game of Thrones is and how awful it's become. And we compared. So at that time, this was an understandable take. We compared it to the kind of strangely sleepwalking attitude towards HBO's Rome.
Yeah.
So Rome is a completely separate series made by the same Heartless Corporation. HBO did a series called Rome.
A lot of the same actors.
A lot of people, I think, would say, if you like one show, check out the other. But what we found really strange was, long story short, our critical perspective on Rome is Season 1 was a flawed masterpiece. Flawed, but a masterpiece. But then Season 2 was jaw-droppingly awful. It was unbelievably bad. So I wanted to title that video HBO's award-winning garbage. Because it just seems strange. It seems like there's no critical capacity to recognize that these shows are going off the rails or getting worse and worse, even when it's as obvious as Season 1 of Rome versus Season 2 of Rome. Now, Game of Thrones has been spread out over 7 or 8 years now, right?
Yeah,
so it's it's more of a gradual, transformation. I mean, I think some people do feel there was like a specific moment when the show became garbage. Mm-hmm. But in any case, maybe not as easy to see with Rome. But I think, in two sentences like that, that's worth saying. We seem to be in a situation where as soon as a show becomes a critical darling, as soon as it becomes a masthead show for HBO, as soon as it becomes their pride and joy, an award-winning, cultural icon of a show, then I don't know. I guess we go into the situation where the producers and writers are presumed to do no wrong, and they have to go a long way wrong before anyone notices. And that's understandable. It's hard to tell someone they're fucking up when they're making millions of dollars.
Yeah.
And winning awards and bringing prestige to the.
I can't say this generally about HBO because I've only seen Rome, Game of Thrones, and more recently Westworld, which you have not watched.
No,
I did see Westworld, so that was only the first season. I thought it was pretty entertaining, but we'll see what happens with the second season.
I remember trying to watch Boardwalk Empire, and I thought it was garbage. We tried to watch that drama about the American Civil War, American Revolution.
Oh, yeah. John Adams.
John Adams. That's the American Revolution.
I watched the first episode.
I found it unwatchable, but we could try again. So I have a few other experiences with HBO being overrated, and there is this kind of narrative, amongst audiences and amongst professional critics, that this is the golden age of television. Mm-hmm. That we're living through a period of time when television is better than
the movies,
better than Hollywood movies.
Yeah,
which may be true
because more convenient. Like you can watch it in your home.
I don't watch Hollywood movies, and most of our recent attempts to watch Hollywood movies, I walk out after 10 minutes saying, it's like this is not this is not at a level of
walk out, meaning just
close the video player on the computer, right? But I mean, for me, I'm someone where Game of Thrones just barely is watchable for me anyway. There's just barely enough political and philosophical content to Game of Thrones to justify my time. But the vast majority of pop culture, I could never watch.
Yeah, and I watched. Did you watch all the seasons? Really, did you binge watch the first couple seasons, or have you been watching
of Game of Thrones? So, okay, there's a great question. How did I start watching Game of Thrones anyway? Well, I had a baby. So my daughter is now 4 years old. So during the pregnancy, it was actually after the birth when we had a newborn baby. I used to lift weights. I used to be doing upright rows. I would stand, but the upright standing exercise, I would do hundreds of those while watching Game of Thrones, and that would be while the baby was sleeping. So you'd rock the baby to sleep. The baby sleeps at funny times. You never really know when it's going to happen. So it was something I could do. I don't know. Predictably but unexpectedly, on no particular schedule. And so my ex-wife, I'm divorced, my ex-wife started watching Game of Thrones, and at first I was so skeptical. I was just like, oh God, this is going to be booby dragon sword fight.
I was so skeptical when I first saw a video about Game of Thrones on your channel. I was like, oh, come on, really? Right.
Right. Well, okay, there's the nudity. There's the reputation the show has for tawdry nudity, right? And
dragons.
Right, there's the fact that it's set in a fantasy world with dragons. This already kind of gives you a prejudice against the show.
Yeah, it's a combination of medieval, I'm just thinking back to when I first heard about the show from one of my college friends, and he was raving about it. He was like, oh my gosh, these are the best books of the century, best show. Right. And when he told me about it, I was like, I don't know. I guess I've never really been into historical movies or fiction.
Right, and this isn't historical.
Right.
But I'm just saying, this doesn't even have to do
he framed it as more historical than
this
it really is.
This has
it's
magic and sword fighting and it's right. So there's a scene in a famous American comedy, a comedy for the theater, and I totally forget the name of this comedy. But so it's a comedy. This is very common for 20th century American theater. It's a commentary on the theater from within the theater. Mm-hmm. So one of the characters is the playwright for the play kind of thing. Yeah, right. It's self-referential. But anyway, so at one point the playwright is reading a review of his newest play, which the play itself is about. So again, it's a play within a play scenario, and he's it's a very positive review, but he's totally disconsolate and mind blown. He says, "A baseball play? How can they say it's a baseball play? It's not a play about baseball. It's about a father's relationship with his son." And he throws down the newspaper and says, "Was Hamlet a play about castles?" The point being, it is a play about baseball, but from the playwright's perspective, he's offended at the suggestion that this is about its setting. But of course, there is a sense in which Hamlet is a play about castles. There is a sense in which Hamlet is a play about sword fighting, and I think it's important to recognize that historically Hamlet was successful in large part as an action movie, an action play. There's a lot of sword fighting in Hamlet. A lot of the plot twists hang on. This came up recently in conversation. At one point in the plot, we expect Hamlet to be a weak sword fighter, but he comments that while he was taken captive by the pirates, he's been doing nothing but practice sword fighting all day, and that he would sword fight. It is what it is. But in terms of reaching a popular audience, I don't think Hamlet was selling tickets because of its lengthy reflections on suicide. It's the same.
Right.
Anyway, but so Game of Thrones is about dragons. It is about sword fights. It is about that stuff. Not entirely, but this season was pretty much entirely.
Yeah.
And about whether or not the sexuality of eunuchs.
Yeah, less brothels, still some nudity, but
yeah. Anyway, there was this video that
fewer brothels.
I wasn't gonna correct
you.
I let it slide.
I'm an English major, god damn it.
Yeah. There was this video up. So speaking of being an English major, that got more than 30,000 views, maybe more than 60,000. I forget. And it criticized the series and the books. It was criticizing both, that they had no catharsis. That this is the flaw in the writing. So this struck me first and foremost. I think this is part of this overall change of mood from everyone saying the show was so wonderful and making excuses about it and kind of justifying it, respond to it that way, to now a kind of cycle where everyone is heaping blame on the show, everyone is heaping scorn on the show, and kind of any criticism, no matter how ridiculous, is valued. No, not that many people read Greek tragedy anymore, ancient Greek tragedy. Full disclosure, I read Greek tragedy in English translation, not in the original Greek, whereas I did read Pali in the original Pali, and I read Chinese in the original Chinese and some stuff. But no, I'm not an ancient Greek scholar. That really struck me because to me, it's kind of a mind-blowingly stupid comment, but wrapped in a kind of veneer of sophistication and respectability. So catharsis, and obviously this is an ancient Greek concept from ancient Greek drama. What kind of a person watching Game of Thrones would feel catharsis when Ramsay Bolton is killed? So I think this guy who made this YouTube video, he probably has a master's degree in English literature or something. I think he has a formal education in this stuff, okay? You could feel that, and I think it's actually a criticism of the show in contrast to the book. What? Are we supposed to feel happy when the evil character is torn apart by dogs?
By his own dogs.
By his own dogs.
That he had trained to tear apart.
Right.
Sansa or whoever.
Should you feel happy? Should you feel catharsis? This is real catharsis in the ancient Greek sense. When Cersei poisons the daughter of the woman who poisoned her own daughter. Mm-hmm. That is catharsis in the strictest ancient Greek sense. That's exactly what they did with their tragedies, including their most formal semi-religious tragedies. So just imagine, in ancient Greek theater, some of the plays were comedies, some were informal, but the high end, or the deep end of simple, some of them were very close to religious rituals where they were acting out drama. They were acting out scripts about Hercules, but that they regarded as religious, in the same way that acting out, the execution of Jesus Christ or something is a deeply religious ritual. A lot of them were very heavy, very, very formal in that sense. And that was catharsis, was when you had that type of revenge. Like an example is when somebody murders the person who plotted to murder their own father and 30 years earlier, this kind of crap. But, and all the evidence is that the crowd cheered. That was satisfying. That, this was a culture where that was regarded positively. Now, again, medieval Christian England, for stealing a pad of paper, for stealing stationery, a man would be broken by the wheel in a public square with the crowd cheering. A lot of these pre-modern cultures, the idea of revenge, the idea of the death penalty for what we'd consider trivial crimes was part of daily life. Maybe we should say weekly life. You'd go to the local festival, you'd go to whatever the event was, and you'd see people being executed and tortured to death. That was, par for the course, part of your culture. Mm-hmm. So, there's a broad question here of what does catharsis mean today? Is it even possible to have catharsis through violence in these kind of movies? Probably there is in the horror genre. Probably there is in mainstream crap. I don't know. Probably, I mean, in comic book movies, I don't know. Is that why people watch comic book movies? Do they actually want to see Batman get revenge against the people who killed his own parents? I don't think so. I don't even think the audience for Batman is that unsophisticated. I don't think people think, yeah, if Batman commits murder, that's good because murder was committed against. I don't think people see it that way. But to me, that's really interesting because it's well, for one thing, it's just terrible criticism of Game of Thrones. And I think part of the subtlety of the book, you know what, you even see this within the Dunk and Egg novels. What is justice in Dunk and Egg? Dunk doesn't want to have his foot and his hand cut off, right? He doesn't want to face an unjust sentence.
Yeah, so...
He also doesn't want to murder 7 people. This is a tournament of 7 against 7, and a couple people die. Not, and a good man dies, a man who would have been king. There's all this other stuff, all these terrible... What is justice? What should you feel catharsis? Does anyone read that story? Is anyone so stupid that they think the story is written so that you're supposed to cheer? Yeah! Dunk and Egg won the sword fight. Therefore, those people deserve to die. Therefore, Dunk didn't deserve to have his foot cut off for the crime he committed, which was a crime, and which we know was basically because he had an erection for this woman. He had a crush on this girl. He wanted to sleep with this girl, so he mutilated a member of the royal family. I mean, that's the reality. He wasn't, outsiders perceived it as if he was standing up for the poor and the downtrodden. He wasn't. He was trying to get laid. I just say this is the psychological. So, I mean, that's the way George R.R. Martin writes, and that's what we have to expect. In the books, we assume that Ramsay Bolton will die. It hasn't happened in the books yet. Maybe Ramsay Bolton will be eaten by his own dogs, but I think exactly the point will inevitably be that there is no justice, there is no catharsis unless you're some kind of monster, unless you are a Ramsay Bolton-like character yourself. Who would believe that's a good or great thing? Dunk and Egg, you're kind of getting in at the shallow end of the swimming pool before you get into the main stories. It's not that morally murky yet. But, I don't know, did you finish all 3, the Dunk and Egg? I don't know if you got to the end yet. Okay, right, so you did. So, the dispute over who controls the water in this river, and the land ownership can be resolved through marriage and this stuff. Okay, you want to talk about justice, which is I think how the author would talk about it.
Yeah.
It's complex, it's dissatisfactory, and so on. Do you want to talk about catharsis? Who's stupid enough to be cheering for one side? The old man got his revenge, or that's the whole point. Is that it's not resolved through revenge. Is Cersei Lannister satisfied to poison this woman's daughter? The same woman who poisoned her daughter with the same poison? That's very ancient Greek. That's like a textbook definition of catharsis, But again, I mean, I don't know what you think of the audience, what you think of yourself. If anyone would think that was satisfactory, or even that's what the plot's about. Maybe that's a failing of the show. We have no idea how the book is going to carry out. I can believe that Cersei will do that or do something like that in the book. We have no idea what's happening. In the books, that's thousands of pages away still from where we're at. But so to me, catharsis is dead. My long story short on that one. All right, so look, we lived through a weird period of time with this. You guys missed out on because the video got deleted. We couldn't get it to upload. We tried again and again. Then I ended up accidentally deleting the video after we tried to upload it 7 times. Our ability to access the internet kind of comes and goes here in China. But I felt like I was swimming against the current a couple of months ago, basically in saying that this show is crap. And now we're in the reverse situation where everyone's lamenting that the show is crap. That's really become the dominant narrative about Game of Thrones. And it seems, as you say, it seems like even the author has kind of switched over to regarding the show as crap. So...
Yeah, he recommended The Last Kingdom on his Twitter page. Right.
So I tried to watch The Last Kingdom. And like I say, I can just barely compel myself to watch Song of Ice and Fire, but it has enough philosophical and political content for the books and the show to be worthwhile for me. And that also was kind of interesting to reflect on. You have an actual English degree. But to me, that made me reflect on, instead of catharsis being dead, that the hero narrative for me is dead. For me, the weakness of that TV show, and it's probably better than the original book, I just have no interest in a plot that revolves around this hero and his greatness and him solving problems because he's so virtuous or he's so clever and he overcomes the odds. Yeah, so that was interesting for me to look at.
I only watched the first episode, but you've told me that the next couple episodes do revolve around him. I think the whole first season.
Well, and I clicked ahead to the start of the second season, kind of wondering if it got more interesting. And I guess the other thing it has, probably the reason why George R.R. Martin likes it is that it deals with religion front and center, which obviously, we're not even trying here to catalog what's wrong with the TV show, but in terms of the weaknesses of the TV show versus the book, the TV show is now really, the TV show being Game of Thrones, the TV show Game of Thrones is really failing to deal with religion. And as the books progress, the books get more and more religious, religion becomes more and more casts more and more of a shadow over the plot and so on. So I can imagine why George R.R. Martin likes The Last Kingdom so much. The Last Kingdom is historical, not fantasy, although it's just barely historical.
Dramatized fiction, or fictionalized history.
Also, in terms of costumes and stuff, people look like they're extras from Star Trek: The Next Generation. They're not trying to be that historically accurate. But it's a long meditation on basically the tragedy of England becoming Christian. Where it's just there's this sense of dread about what medieval Christianity means in Europe and in England specifically, and of torture and just all the horrible aspects of medieval Christianity creeping into that society. But that hero narrative to me, man,
it's boring.
I have zero interest. I have absolutely zero interest, which again made me reflect on, well, why is it that I can get behind Game of Thrones? Basically, nobody in Game of Thrones is a hero. And even if you think of one or two characters as heroic, they don't perceive themselves as such. They're not perceived as such within the fictional world. And there's a lot of ambiguity and bumping of shoulders between would-be heroes or what have you.
Sorry, I know you haven't seen it, but that's how Westworld is. Like, there isn't one hero. That is interesting about the show.
Well, one of the basic concepts we had in the 20th century was the theater of ideas. And ultimately, for me, Game of Thrones, A Song of Ice and Fire, it's interesting as the theater of ideas. And I think the vast majority of people say no. They quote George R.R. Martin about this. It's about the human heart in conflict with itself. It's about the passions. It's about the emotions and so on. You really care about how Jon Snow feels? Really? At any point? At any point in season 7, you care about how Jon Snow feels? I don't anymore. We said this in the earlier video. The romance between Jon Snow and Ygritte actually was a successful romance and had kind of stereotypical audience members were on the edge of their seat and so on. The romance between Jon Snow and Daenerys is the non-event of 2017. It's literally not worth talking about. We couldn't be bothered to make a YouTube video talking about it. It's just garbage. So yeah, hey, there you go, guys. Some interesting reflections on HBO's award-winning garbage. I wonder if, in terms of what can work in those story meetings, at those table readings, I wonder if there really is a problem or a pattern with these shows being cursed by their own success. You get over a certain level of success, and then you start to lose the sort of necessary self-criticism and rounds of rewriting, improvement, and self-improvement that made maybe the first 3 seasons so great, or as good as they are, or whatever you want to say. I know, it's commonly said that one of the best elements of the first 3 seasons were actually the filler scenes, because they didn't have enough material. And then they would write these scenes, like philosophical dialogue between Varys and Littlefinger, which was not planned. It was written last minute and stuff. That they would have these rounds of rewrites and filler, which produced some of the best, most philosophical material on the show. Evidently, that's gone. And what you've got left now is a kind of, brainless action movie, booby, dragon, sword fight. And if you came here to watch an action movie, there's not enough of any of those 3. There's not enough sex or sexuality to introduce, not enough boobies compared to what you can get on the internet or what you can get on the next channel on TV. It's not sexy. It's not romantic. It doesn't work in the way the Ygritte plot worked as a really involving one. Doesn't really work, or it's not satisfactory as an action movie. You can watch a kung fu movie or something. And I don't think the high fantasy elements can carry it either. Again, I said, do you care about Jon Snow's feelings? Did you care when that dragon died? Did that reach you emotionally?
Of course not. No.
I rest my case.